First teaser for the Concord episode of the video game anthology series Secret Level, releasing December 10th on Prime Video. What is amazing about this is that the game for which this is being made, of course, is now like lost media. It's dead. It's not technically lost because a lot of us still have it installed on our PlayStations, but you can't launch it. You can't play it. And they greenlit this episode, which cost them millions and millions and millions of dollars. They greenlit this episode a year, 2 years ago. I don't know when they would have greenlit it, but long enough for them to make it. And it shows like the arrogance perhaps of Sony's leadership, that they just assumed that this would pop off. They just assumed people would love this and that this would be kind of like I'm trying to think of other live service games. Even if Overwatch had their own dedicated episode, I'd be like, okay, who cares? But it reflects what like Colin Moriarty said, his source communicated, which is that Herman Hulst called it his baby, or people called it Herman Hulst baby. They expected it to be a Star Wars level franchise for them. They expected this to pop off on that level. And it starts to make sense why they were greenlighting all this stuff if they approached it that way, if they really thought that Concord was going to be received that way. I'm scrubbing through it because if I play it outright, it's going to get copyright struck, no doubt. In the lead up to this, they've also said that they anticipate this will show the potential that Concord's characters had. This will show the potential of the world and stuff. But it is at its core reflective of the dissonance within all of the entire Concord project, which was just that they framed it as this amazing world with interesting characters and stuff, but it's a hero shooter. And I can imagine the boardroom meeting where like Herman and all those guys and the Sony execs from Japan, they're all like, so we're going to spend how many hundreds of millions of dollars on this project? I thought PlayStation's whole thing, like our whole thing was single player narrative driven stuff. And Herman's like, that's the brilliance of this. We have this innovative new storytelling technique, which ended up just being a cutscene that plays before you boot into the game, which every other live service game does. But this one will change every week. It's like, we have that, and it's a really expansive world and universe. We're going to do this episode with this anthology series through Amazon Prime that's going to build the world and universe and everything. And so people will come for, it's interesting. I think they thought that people would come for the story and for the world and characters, and they would stay for the gameplay. When live service games typically work the opposite. They come for the gameplay and they stay for like the new characters, the long-term support, stuff like that. But at the core, like gameplay is probably 85-95% of the equation. But with this, I think they really thought that they could flip it and it would pop off. That people would be like, I'm not in love with the gameplay. Gameplay is kind of bland, but Hot Sauce Guy is super cool. I love Hot Sauce Guy. I'm going to keep playing because I want to see where his story goes next week. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any damn sense. Luke should absolutely review the Concord episode. Dude, I will. You better believe I will. Some of them look good. I mean, the God of War one that they're going to drop, I'm sure it's going to be badass. I think they're going to do some cool episodes. It's just, again, the hubris, as one of you put in chat. The hubris is what's really interesting about this. People love that Arcane. They'll love this. Yeah, it's like we talked about on the podcast with Joe Raptor with the Horizon stuff, because of course the Horizon Lego game continues to nosedive, and it's really bizarre because that game was never going to sell gangbusters. I'm sure they spent, I don't know how many millions they spent on it, but they spent a good chunk of change. You know, it wasn't a free game or anything, and they marketed it a lot. And already, like, player counts have almost completely dried up. And it's a concurrent player count, so this is all about, I mean, this is a single-player game. You wouldn't expect this number to be particularly high. But seeing all-time peaks in this range for even a single-player game in what's supposed to be their biggest franchise, or one of their biggest franchises, with estimated sales, I would guess, because typically these are all very generous. As I said on the podcast, I think they probably sold across both, like all platforms, they probably sold about 10,000 copies of this. Like, this isn't turning a profit. I don't think this is turning a profit. But this is what happens when Sony keeps insisting that they're going to make this a thing. They're going to make Horizon a thing and you're going to like it. You know, they're trying to just force players into liking stuff that they just don't really like. And it's the same thing with Concord, is they were like, no, you're going to like it because it has like a Guardians of the Galaxy vibe. And we say we have really good characters. I know all of you think they're insufferable, but we say they're good, so that makes them good. It's just arrogance. And this has always been the plague upon Sony, because people forget, like, going out of the PS2 into the PS3 generation, Sony was at the top. Sony was kicking butt and taking names, and then, in the words of Peter Griffin, giving those names to other people whose butts they had kicked already. They were seemingly at the precipice. There was no beating them. And then they released the PS3, and it is horrifically expensive for the time. It ends up being incredibly difficult to develop for with its unique architecture. And as a result, games run very buggy on the PS3 versus the 360. And Sony loses a ton of ground and really was playing catch up, trying to repair their reputation for a long time. And they got hungry again. They stopped being so cocky and arrogant, and they got hungry, and then started the PS4 generation. Who was it that was arrogant? It was Xbox. Xbox comes in and says, you need to buy our always online machine. And if you don't like our always online machine, too bad, you can buy the 360. We still have that available. Yeah, and that's a good point, Banana. Yeah, they also at the PS3 generation, at the same time, Sony is struggling with convincing people their console's worth the price and that it's worth putting up with the bugs and that developers should put up with the difficulty in developing for it. They also are coming out swinging with Gears of War, with Halo. I mean, really the golden age of Xbox, in my opinion, is that 360 era. But then the PS4 generation comes around with the Xbox One, always online. If you don't like it, buy a 360. They were pushing Kinect. The whole selling point of the Xbox One that was in all of the marketing was that it was a cable box game console hybrid. A cable box game console hybrid. It's the most corporate thing ever, where they looked at the spreadsheet and saw everybody has a cable box because everybody has cable. People like gaming. If we make a cable box gaming device, all of the cable box people will buy our cable box, and all the gaming people will buy the gaming box. We'll get double the sales. It makes so much, like, it is the most clear-cut example of corporate leadership by spreadsheet that I've ever seen. Like, it was so insane. It was so stupid. And then everything else, like, you can't share your games. And Sony posts that viral clip of how to share your games on PlayStation. And it's just them handing the box to the other guy. And that's the whole thing. It was like 13 seconds long. And Sony dominates the PS4 generation, especially with like later generation console exclusives that really sell it, are taking Game of the Year awards. And they built up this brand reputation that if Sony's releasing something from one of these key studios, whether that's like Naughty Dog or Santa Monica, like they're going to win Game of the Year. And that's kind of presumed nowadays, kind of like Rockstar. You assume if Rockstar's releasing something, it's going to get nominated and it's probably going to win. Might not. Sometimes there's an upset like God of War, but typically, like, when Rockstar comes out swinging, they're going to dominate. And same with Naughty Dog and those guys. Well, Xbox floundered. And now it seems like PlayStation's in a similar boat as they were in that PS3 generation, where they have grown incredibly cocky. And perhaps rightly so. I mean, they really did dominate the PS4 gen. They've been dominating the PS5 gen so far. But players have started to grow frustrated because all Sony seems to be focused on is remakes, remasters, spin-offs of a franchise nobody frankly cares that much about. And I mean, you might love Horizon. It doesn't seem like you're playing that.
This is why Phil is releasing Xbox games on PS5. Sony is stumbling. Make their customers love Xbox games. Next gen, they'll be exclusive again.
Thank you for the 12 months, by the way. Happy 1 year. Happy anniversary. We made it, Lucas. We did it. I don't think they will pull and start doing totally exclusive stuff next gen. What I think Xbox is just doing is they're like, hardware is tough. It's really tough to be competitive. Let's just let Sony deal with all that crap, and we'll sell games to their customers. So with this, I'm going to watch it because I'm fascinated. I don't think I'm seeing any of the characters from the like base game. Not that I see. Ooh, spooky. But even with all this, like, this is again just the dissonance with this whole project. Even if this is really good, all it would make me want is a narrative game in this universe. Like, let's say this is amazing. It's just going to make me want a narrative version of this, which they weren't making. It was a 5v5 hero shooter. And that's what just never made any sense about Concord. Like it's just at its core, it doesn't make sense. And ultimately that's why it flops, because if the game doesn't make sense, if the narrative doesn't make sense, it's not going to go anywhere. And that's what we saw.
He took my thing.